Hello and welcome to this week's video on My Hero Academia. This week I will be reviewing the final episode of the first volume of Vigilantes. You know the rules and so do I. Let me know what you thought about it in the comment section down below and you will be read out in a future video. Whilst you're there, be sure to like, favourite, subscribe and do all YouTube stuff that YouTube wants to do, because YouTube is an increasingly scary place for small content creators. Support your local small content creator today. It will do them a power of good. And a big thank you to all the new subscribers that we've got over the past few videos or so. It truly does me a power of good. Now on to the review, and as we always do at the start of one of these reviews, we start out with the positives. And I have to say that this particular episode was a fine way to end this collection of episodes. You can't really call it a season, you can't really call it a full arc. I want to call it an omnibus, but it really isn't an omnibus, so we're just going to have to refer to it as a volume, because I suppose that's technically what it is called. Sorry, this is my first delving into the world of manga, so all the terminology as far as that's concerned, still very, very new to me. Though I have to say that, again, this is everything that I could have hoped that the final part in a volume like this would end up being. It continues to develop the world, the characters, with some fun moments and action sequences therein, and had a really brilliant idea for the villain that we get introduced to in the latter half of this particular episode. This was very much an episode centered around establishing the core story of this arc. You could argue that this is a bit late given that we are 5 episodes into this, but I can't help but feel that any kind of grumblings I have towards that is due to the format that I'm reading all of this in. I am far more used to omnibuses where you'd get an entire storyline in one big book, which isn't what we're getting here. This is just volume after volume after volume with the episodes presented in those small packages. You don't get the full arc, you get part of an arc as you keep going on with it, which is fine. It's just another thing that I need to get used to. Trigger, for the time being at least, is the main focus of the story, and this week we get it brought into more compelling focus. It is not just a device that's used to earn us yet another exciting action sequence. It is now being developed a lot more, with the mystery surrounding it all being brought more into the fold once again. We don't have the salaryman anymore seemingly to be behind it all. We have a new villain who we shall see just exactly how far they go with all of this, and I have to say that, just for the sake of the here and now, I think this new villain is really fascinating and really neat. I feel almost in reading this particular chapter, I am in the same kind of state of mind that I am with our heroes. We now have a villain, we now have a lead. Maybe now things are going to feel a little more focused from this point out, but we'll soon see about that. I think that one of my highlights of this particular episode was the great interaction that we had between some of our characters. The part where Crawler and Popstep are together, and B suggests that they're an item, and then Crawler says no, and you have Popstep saying something along the lines of, "Why are you so quick to deny it?" I really liked that bit. I will admit that throughout this particular episode, I was laughing a hell of a lot. It was really a brilliant thing for me to read. I liked the little bit that we had with the fake X-Men characters again, trying to buddy up with and get to know the guy that had used Trigger in the previous episode. It was a small little interaction, and it ended up helping to better develop the main story and give them something a little bit more of a justification to still be in the story. Their method of interrogation seemingly is just to, get to know the guy, see how they're doing. They're both good cops in this scenario. Speaking of cops, I have to say that I did like seeing the detective work within this particular story. The detective interviewing the villain from the previous episode was neat. It gives us a clearer idea as to how the authorities themselves are putting all of this together. I have to say that I feel that the police in general within the My Hero Academia stories have always just kind of been there. They've never really had a major focus within the story themselves, even if there was a brief period in the main series where it felt like the detective, I think it's the same detective that's featured in this episode, was going to become more of a recurring character, but then ultimately didn't. And in general, the only time you ever see like the police or anything in My Hero Academia, sadly it's the case here, that only seem to be there just for the sake of delivering exposition, which isn't the worst way in going about it. But with all that said, I have to say that, what we got here, yes, it is exposition heavy, but it's still neat. I understand why we don't see more of the police in the main series, however, because, this is a superhero series, and in a world where superhero work is largely legal, they're not really needed. With that said, I am kind of surprised that even in the main series, we haven't even had that many moments where just one of my heroes says, "Take them away, boys!" Never really had even so much as a moment like that, and just having the police here adds element of flavour and a little bit of authenticity, even if it does come at the cost that I do feel that their presence here was a little bit too exposition heavy for my liking. Though granted, it does make sense that we would have the police being more within this story, rather than in the main series, given that, you know, our heroes in this story are vigilantes. They are criminals. They're probably going to have more than a few run-ins with the law, and I'm interested to see how that can be more developed going forward. I hope that the fight that we had with Eraserhead earlier in this particular volume isn't the only time where we see them clashing with heroes. I think that we need that little bit more of a contrast. We need to see them not just fighting villains but also fighting heroes, if only due to the fact that they need to get away with them, or rather get away from them. You know, otherwise it's going to feel a little bit odd. Like, the only thing that would then make the vigilantes and the heroes any different would be just purely the fact that of licensing, and I want to see the vigilantes really being on the edge of the law. That means having these run-ins with heroes, but we'll probably see how that goes in future episodes. The knockoff X-Men characters, as I mentioned previously, they're back again, and as I've said before, I think that it's a cute reference. I think that they work great as background/side characters, and having them being recurring characters is neat. I just hope that they don't end up becoming overused, which I'm kind of worried that they will end up being. Like I say, I've liked the way that they're used in this particular episode. They're interrogating the villain guy just by becoming friends with them and buddying up with them. I think that's cute. I think that's neat. But I am worried that we're going to see a lot too much of them. Just seeing them that first time in one of the couple of episodes a few weeks ago was fun. It was neat. It was a nice thing to see, but I worry that the more that we see them, the less impact that joke has, if you get what I mean. Like, it loses its impact as it starts to become a little bit too repetitious, but we'll see how that goes. We'll see. That's all I'll say on that, but we'll see. Knuckle Duster is still a great character. I will admit he's not really as present in this particular episode as he has been in the previous ones, which I'm fine with. I really enjoy the character. I think he's one of my favourite in the whole My Hero Academia world, and I am happy that we don't see much of him this week because, again, to go to the previous point, it prevents him becoming too overused. I will admit I want to see exactly how he managed to suss out that the source of the transformations that we end up seeing later in the episode are as a result of a B-Quirk user. Because, sure, it's obvious when you have the thing in your hands and you can see the syringe on the abdomen of it, but how would you know otherwise? How would you know to look? How would you know that something's suspicious going on here? Like, sure, he's a very perceptive guy. He might have managed to suss it out, but it just feels like a little bit of a lucky guess for the sake of keeping the story spinning over, which I'll admit I'm not really much of a fan of. It feels a little bit too coincidental for my liking. Though I will admit that the moment where he grabs the fake Wolverine guy, just says, "It's a B-user!" and just the insane look that he has on his face is fantastic. It's just one of those moments like when he was trying to find drugs of anyone on the first episode. Well, there's a part of me that's hoping, please let it be wrong. Please let it be wrong. Please just let this guy be a crazy person. Because I think that would be hilarious. But still, it wasn't. The only issue there, like I say, is I want to see how he managed to suss it out. All I just need is a panel where he just says, well, I was just there minding my own business, doing some patrolling, then I saw that bee jab the guy, then all of a sudden they started spouting feathers out of their fingers, and then that's how we get the explanation. Fine, that's good, that will be enough. I don't think we'll get that, but maybe we will do. I will say that very briefly that I think the action sequence we see the pro heroes with them racing down to take down the victims of Trigger was brilliantly well designed, choreographed and drawn. I don't really have much to add on to it other than saying that it was well executed, even if I don't think it was executed quite to the way that I think it should have done. Oh sure, from a pure ones and zeros point of view, it was great, dynamic, well put together, well shot, well choreographed. Possibly a bit too short, but all the same, great. But I kind of, again, feel that there's an element of this that's been lost somewhere along the lines, but we'll discuss that in just a moment. I have to say that the big standout thing that I really enjoyed with this particular episode was the introduction of this new villain, their Quirk, and how they used it is fantastic. I will admit that I do feel it was a little bit signposted. kind of a bit too hard that they were going to be an important character because of just how distinct they looked. It's kind of like when you watch old Hanna-Barbera cartoons and you can tell which door is going to be the door they're going to have to go through, or which prop the character's going to interact with. Here it's the same kind of philosophy. The more interesting a character looks, the more likely they'll end up being a character. Though I will be honest, I wasn't sure if she'd turn out to be a hero or a villain until, well, things just started to happen. She seemed kind of unassuming, and I will admit there was a part of me that was thinking, oh Chris, you're being a little bit too paranoid. This is just a distinct looking character, this is a distinct looking extra. They can't possibly be, oh my god! Using her quirk to inject people with trigger is so bloody horrifying on so many levels. Her eye is filled with bees! Bees inject people with things. She's injecting people with trigger. It's such a frigging chilling idea to me. Because seemingly, people don't know what's happening to them when it's happening. Sure, trigger might be known, but it's not known. You know, like, we all know what LSD is, but not all of us have done LSD, so we wouldn't know we're under the effects of it if we should accidentally take it unless we've taken it before. And this is the case here. People aren't going to know what's happening to them until long after the fact. I mean, just imagine you're going about your day in this world, just minding your own business, doing a bit of shopping, walking to work, walking to school, walking home. Then all of a sudden your body starts to rebel against you, practically turning against you and becoming your worst enemy, tearing you apart, reacting without you wanting it to, and there's nothing you can do to stop it because you don't know why it's happening. Maybe you're freaking out because you're someone that believes in the Quirk's doomsday theory, and you're thinking, well, now it's happening and I'm going to be patient zero. And the only people that can help you in this moment are the people that are going to see you as a threat, people that you looked up to, your idols, your heroes, people that you might well have been following ever since you were a child, are just going to see you as yet another minor problem that needs to be dealt with, just another goon, just another goofball, just another villain. To you, this is the day your life changed forever, but to them, it's only Tuesday. And when this ends, it's going to end in an intensely painful way. They are going to beat the ever-loving life out of you just to make sure you don't do any more harm. You could be knocked about 6 ways from Sunday, and even if you survive this, you might still not survive this, because you may never truly know what happened to you, and even if you do find out what happened to you, would it really change anything? Even if you're absolved of any wrongdoing, do you think it would really matter to the wider public? To some of your friends, your boss, your teachers, maybe even your own family? Because as far as all they're going to be concerned, for the longest time, is just, you're a trigger user, you're a bad guy, you're a wrong'un, you're a villain, you were hiding in the shadows for all this time, and they might well write you off because of it. Whatever secret that you might have, that you go a long way around to get home because you like to go to that cafe that has the donuts you like, and you've been keeping it a secret from your family, well, now they're going to think the secret you've been keeping is you've been taking trigger and God knows what else. Oh, those nights out that you spend when you go into the city and go to a nightclub, oh no, you weren't just going to Lava Ignite, no, you were going to a secret drug den. All these rumours will start to enter into your life, and whatever good reputation you had with some of your most clearest and nearest and dearest will just start to melt away and fade away, all because of this. Even if you get away from this scot-free, your reputation will be ruined, and you might never find out what really happened with all of this. It might not take years before it's even fully known or fully comprehended. You may lose your job, you may get expelled from your school or your university, you might get thrown out of your house, you might be split from your partner, all because someone else decides to use you as a weapon, and there'd be nothing that you can do about it. There may never be a public inquiry about it. The true facts of the matter may never be made public for fear that it might inspire someone else, and your life will end up getting ruined all because of it. You know, you could quite easily get away with all of this, you could be forgiven for all of this, but some people might not accept that. Some people might think that you're cut off scot-free, you were let off, though really because you did a plea deal or something, even though you had nothing to do about all of this. And they just might be scared of you from this point on because they're afraid of you ever using your power ever again, even if in reality your power's just kind of really weak and not that scary, but under trigger is one of the scariest things around. a close family member of yours could quite easily have done an interview where they say, well, I could never imagine they'd have done anything like this. They were always so quiet. Your entire life would be thrown away, destroyed, all just for the sake that a villain wanted to create a distraction. Or because she just wanted to be a dick. Let's be honest, she really doesn't need a reason to do any of this. Not with a power like that. She could quite easily have something like this happen to anyone she wants, out of pet revenge because someone side-eyed her, or just for pure entertainment, and no one would ever know it was her. It would all be on to poor sod whoever ended up transforming and going nuts and causing all these problems, with the professionals pinning it on the poor bugger that's involved in all this, or some Oliver villain in the system that they need a Cassius Belli to end up going and interviewing or arresting or whomever. And you might well survive it, but it will probably end up killing your reputation and identity, all because someone else needed to use you. And that whole idea to me is just horrifying. And regretfully, that whole idea and how it's ultimately executed is something that we're going to have to discuss in the negatives. I think that in this episode, the action itself, whilst well put together, was just kind of lackluster, which I will admit is kind of ironic given that in the previous episode and a few episodes before that I was complaining about the level of action that we would end up having, but here it didn't quite live up to expectation. Sure, it might look better in animation, there might be a few modifications to this if it's ever animated, which I really think that it needs, but here and now it just doesn't live up to the full potential that it has. The action sequence that we see here when the heroes are going in to deal with the victims of Trigger, that is a moment that should be uncomfortable. That is a moment that should be traumatic. It should be troubling. It should make you feel sick to your stomach when all this is happening. Because to the heroes and the wider world, this is just another villain attack. They're going to go at this hammer and tong as they always have done. And just that in mind, just to me, is horrifying. They're going to use all their iconic moves, their iconic abilities. They're going to swing about like a ragdoll and smash you about. Just because you just happen to be in the wrong place, in the wrong time, or were used as a distraction. And the heroes themselves won't know that, because to them, you're just another monster. Your body is rebelling against you and there's nothing you can do about it, and your body is going to get smashed to pieces. Your livelihood, your reputation, it's going to get ruined. This is practically body horror. And for that, I make think like that to work and to really have that gut punch, you really need to juxtapose the heroic comic book action stuff you get here with the pro heroes and just really knock it up to 11. You need to see them doing all their iconic moves and all their iconic moments and having the crowd cheering them on and going, yeah, go get them all, mate, yeah, you really kicked her head in, yeah, and just create this really uncomfortable atmosphere to really knock it to the next level. And we don't really get that. The action sequence only itself lasts for about a page or so, and a lot of the times you just see the end results of it. We need to just see people really getting behind the heroes and really egging on these bad guys, these villains, because these are real wrong-uns, even though we ourselves know that isn't the case. And again, I think that it really needed to be built up into that, and regretfully isn't. Sure, this might be a different strokes for different folks thing. Just because I say that it needed to do this doesn't mean to say it actually needs to be. Because just because it's different doesn't mean to say that it's good. But again, I feel that that moment to really ram it home needed to be a little bit on the dark side, or even darker still. And in the end, I don't really think that it was really done so. But to be fair, I am someone that quite happily reads darker comic books. I'm a big fan of Judge Dredd and 2000 AD, so naturally I'm going to pivot a little bit more on the, yeah, let's make him even more miserable, yeah. But still, beyond that, I can't take away that it just, conceptually, all the stuff with B is just brilliant. I really love it, and I hope that they really build upon this character going forward, because just the idea, this whole thing in this episode is one of my favourite things in My Hero Academia. So still, in conclusion, I think that this episode was really fantastic. They had some really great elements within it. I will admit that certain elements weren't quite used as much as they should have been, with certain other elements being used a little bit too much, but as a whole, this is a fine way to end this particular volume. It ends it on pretty much of a cliffhanger, which I think this needed. And again, as I always say, I would like to see this all animated. With all that said and done, let's get into Comment Corner! This comment comes from the previous review episode I did on My Hero Vigilantes, on My Hero Academia. You know the thing that I'm doing. It comes from Big X1, who says, this week's episode, which was, of course, the episode I did a couple of weeks ago, was a fun one, though it did feel like a bit of a repeat on last week's in some ways. Feel better soon, Hall's Variety Pack. Thanks for the comment, and I have to say that I do kind of agree. I think the previous 2 episodes, whilst I did enjoy them, they kind of felt a little bit too much like Groundhog Day. It's just our heroes are doing something, and all of a sudden someone takes trigger and goes crazy. Then the next episode, our heroes are just doing things, and a villain takes trigger and goes crazy. This week it spices it up a bit because our villains aren't villains; they're just regular everyday Joes and Janes on the streets that end up getting turned into monsters because of some horrible bratty teenage girl. And I think, again, brilliant idea, and I really like this week's episode. I'm not ashamed to say it. And thank you for your well wishes. I felt a lot better around the time that I actually recorded that episode, or rather, the day that episode went out. Like, I was in a really bad way and I was really panicking about it. But still, thank you for your well wishes, thank you for the comments, and thank you all for watching this week's video. I will be continuing to be doing the reviews on My Heroes Vigilantes. I just don't know when my next copies of the volumes are going to coming through. They should coming through in the next few days or so, but we'll see about that. But in any case, thank you all for listening, and see you next time. Goodbye! Thanks for watching. Be sure to like, favourite, subscribe, click the bell, and do all the YouTubey stuff that YouTube wants you to do. Go on, it'll do me a power of good. Until next time, my friends, goodbye!